This is the Tyre Kickers, classic car chat with Max and Matt.
Well, hello there. Like rust on an old Lancia, we have returned, and we're filling all the gaps with another 40 minutes of classic car yap.
On this episode, if you want a classic Range Rover, don't buy a Range Rover Classic. That's because I'm about to argue the L322 is the real choice for roving your range.
Also sticking with Rover, I'm proposing we do the world a favour and crush that boring and ugly saloon, the Rover P6. It's our crush or caress debate, and I'm ready to turn P6s into something more useful, like a barbecue.
Forget the barbecue, you'll be the only thing getting roasted. Meanwhile, would you ever consider swapping the oily old motor in your shiny Classic for something newer, less drippy, and more reliable? We'll talk engine swaps.
The Tyre Kickers.
We'll also find out how I discovered a secret stash of classic cars in a lockup in Spain. Plus, we'll have all your comments and corrections from the last show.
So, without any more manana, let's fire up episode 27 of The Tyre Kickers. Matt.
Yes.
I was out in the Merc last weekend and I saw another Sunbeam Alpine out enjoying the sunshine. Now, I know they're quite rare. I think that's the only other one apart from yours I've ever seen on the road.
Oh, really? Okay. All right, I've got some questions for you. One, was it dripping oil?
No, well, I didn't check. It wasn't going that fast.
Well, you can go back. There'll be a line of it. How old was the driver? Right, really old? Or like
120?
my age? Okay.
Yeah, your age.
No, I meant young. Did it look shiny or nice or old and knackered? Because
it looked lovely. I mean, it was white. It had red leather. It looked beautiful.
Oh, okay. Well, there is a few of them about. How many left? I think it's about 1,400 on the roads. There's probably about 400 and 500 or so sawn. And there was, off the top of my head, 70,000 or so made. So that's not really very good maths at the end of it. You don't see that many on the roads. And I'll tell you for why. The values were very, very low until about 10 years ago. And a lot simply got crushed and canned. There wasn't much love for them. Oh, God, to confess, actually, I didn't really know what they were before I bought mine.
Did you buy yours in a sudden whim, or did you do any, what we call now research?
No,
right, so you just bought it straight away?
No, I don't do what you do. Spend 2 years reading every magazine you can get hold of about them. No, I tell you what, I don't think I've ever said this yet. I watched a Top Gear on Bond cars, and it was on there.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I was sort of in the market to buy a Classic again, and I just thought, oh, that looks good. And then, one thing leads to another, and before you know, you're standing in a car dealer's
I just want to check
forecourt.
I mean, you say it was a Bond car. It was in a Bond film. I think that's two separate things. You wouldn't call that 2CV a Bond car, would you? It was in a Bond film.
You would.
Would you?
No, hold on. Whoa.
Is this what the salesman told you? Oh, yeah, it's a Bond car. It's virtually a DB5.
Does Bond drive the 2CV?
Yes.
Okay. Is it his car?
Well, no, he grabs it, doesn't he? So no. So I wouldn't say that's a Bond car.
The Sunbeam is the first car that James Bond drives on screen.
Yeah, but he never drove it again, did he? So it wasn't a really successful Bond car, like the DB5 that keeps coming back.
Well, no, because after that, they got wise to it. Actually, the story of why it's the first Bond car is quite interesting, because they shot Dr. No in Jamaica, I think, and they got there and they couldn't get a car. So they literally just scoured the island for whatever they could find and just chucked some money in the direction of the person with his Sunbeam Alpine and shot it on screen.
That's not like it was a specially made DB5 for the film, was it? It just happened to be there. That's what it was about.
Well, actually, the Bond film, they didn't know it was going to be a hit or not. It was a trial, wasn't it? And it was only because it then just became Dr. No became an enormous hit beyond expectation that suddenly it started getting commercial, didn't it? And that's why cars and sponsorships and all that sort of stuff, right the way up until now, have become like that. So yeah, it is a Bond car. Shake your face.
Anyway, right, I saw one on the streets and I was quite pleased because it did look lovely.
We've only been at it 2 minutes, already arguing about it, aren't we? Yeah, I mean, I didn't know much about Sunbeam Alpines. The parts are cheap and available. There's less than an MGB, but as we've talked about in the past, I can't fit in an MGB. But yeah, no, it's quite nice. I mean, you saying that as well, it just reminds me how frustrated I am that I haven't got my car out yet.
Yeah, I am as well. Come on, it's time.
I know.
It's had some beautiful weather. I know it's been cold, but
it's in storage. It's in storage. It's not at my house, and I need a bit of time to sort of move it about. And work's been busy lately, and I just haven't had the time. So I've sort of got to get it sorted. I have half an hour ago, while I was waiting to come and do this, I've started ordering all the bits for service actually, So I've been going back through my old photos going, what oil filter was it I need? So I've ordered the filter and the oil, and you have to have a special type of oil, blah, blah, blah.
Because you just ordered some oil for your car. Why don't you just chuck it on the drive and cut out the middleman?
Well, no. You got to do it properly. What I'll do is I'll just stab a hole with a pair of scissors in the bottom of the oil can, and then just slowly drip it over the course of a year, over the course of a summer. Just drip it over the drive,
and then give somebody $2,000 to try and sort it out.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, that's how I need to sort that oil leak, don't I?
You're listening to The Tyre Kickers with Max and Matt.
Since I last spoke to you, I managed to get away for a few days to the Canary Islands, Fuerteventura, and I thought it was going to be a non-car thing, but a couple of car things happened. Firstly, I met a guy who'd flown from Poland to buy a second-hand Lexus V8 that he saw on Facebook Marketplace and just fancied, a 20-year-old one. And then he says to me, oh, there's a classic car private collection up the road. Spun? He said, yeah, no, let's jump in the car. So I drove the Lexus up the road, and we went and had a look, and I got invited into this classic car collection. And I won't say where it is in Fuerteventura, but it's on the island. And there are the guy owns up to 100 classic cars. And in this one place, the door slid back, and there was a collection of classic, sort of everyman classics. And I'm not talking DB5s, I'm talking 2CV vans and Beetles. And I sent you some pictures, didn't I?
Yeah, they look great. I mean, it was really interesting to look round. And also, when I was looking at that, because it's Spain, I couldn't see much rust on some of this stuff. But just what kind of stuff was in the barn then?
Oh, there was all sorts of really nice stuff. In fact, when I sent it to you, you sent me a reply saying I could have a holiday in there. So we're talking BMW 635 CSI, probably the nicest one I've ever seen, apart from one I saw in the 80s. And immaculately, all these cars are sort of completely redone. Fiat 500, a couple of Mercedes 123s, a Peugeot 304, two beautiful Beetles, including a really old one with a beautiful interior, a nice old Land Rover. What was that? Series 3, Series 2? Mercedes 114, Citroen GS, and just sort of a lot of British stuff like old Bedford vans, but again in pristine condition, transit double axles, 2CVs, 2CV van, a gorgeous little Renault 4, absolutely beautiful. I mean, I think they're quite cool, underrated cars anyway, Renault 4s.
Yeah, lovely.
This was beautiful inside out, absolute showroom fresh almost. The Polish guy, Jacek, who I met and I spoke to. Actually, I'll put his picture on Instagram. You can see him in his Lexus V8. I'm inspired by his story just to fly out somewhere and buy something. Normally in the Canary Islands, if you've been to the Canary Islands and you go to the back roads, you do see quite a lot of old Mercedes tooling around, a lot of 123s. And for me, I'd love that. I'd love a Mercedes over there. I could just jump over in the winter and just drive that around for 6 months. So I'll do that. But yeah, it just goes to show if you start talking cars with people, it does open doors. I mean, this opened doors to a whole collection of stuff that I would not have known is there.
So a big thank you to those of you who responded to our shameless, blatant begging for an Apple podcast review.
Daz R666 gave us 5 stars and said, I stumbled on this podcast and I'm glad I did. Great knowledge, humour, and a good range of cars discussed. Brilliant.
Thank you very much for that. Another one, Saar Barnsey, also gave us 5 big stars and said, really enjoy the podcast. It makes the long drive to the office in a boring Tesla a lot more pleasurable. Could do with it being more frequent, though. Oh, no thanks.
No, we've been here before. No, sorry, that's the most you're going to get out of us. Thank you for those. The more the merrier. If you do enjoy this nonsense and you want it to keep going, please, can you leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts? I know we shamelessly beg, but it does bump the show up, the ratings there, and it helps us build an audience because people spot us.
Still to come on episode 27, we've got the Rover P6 wrongly on the conveyor belt, ready to be caressed or crushed. But first, let me let our listener into a Tyre Kicker's behind-the-scenes secret. Matt moans a lot about the engine on his Sunbeam Alpine, and now he's going to moan about it in front of the scenes as well.
Well, you say moaning. I don't moan. I just sort of merely think
it's
aloud
moaning,
about it.
Trust me.
Well, it's not. Look, here's the thing. And if you've got an old classic car, if you've got an old 60s car especially, you might relate to this. Do you ever think about the fact that the engine, if you had a slightly newer engine in it, I'm not talking new, I'm talking sort of like, sort of 80s, 90s engine, it might just run a bit better. It might not leak so much. It might not need so much attention. I mean, let's face it, I've got a car from 1968 and it's got a 1968 engine in it. So that's a 60-year-old lump that gets very hot, is very noisy. And obviously as engines went through the years, that they improved them slightly. The natural swap in mine is to put a Mazda MX-5 engine in it and a 5-speed box. Hold on.
Heresy.
Shut up.
Heresy.
So the natural swap is to put a Mazda MX-5 from about the late 80s, 90s. I think it's a Mark 1, Mark 2, in with a 5-speed box. And that slips into the engine bay and the transmission tunnel pretty simply. And then you've got a car with a bit more legs. Now, my car is okay on the motorways. It can do motorway speed, sort of left-hand lane. With a Mazda MX-5, it would probably be a lot happier. It's not an engine that's particularly grumbly and difficult. It's just an old lump. So there is that. You can also swap it for a Ford Cologne V6 as well and get a V6 power, which then makes it a little bit more interesting. And I know you're going to have a moan about this.
I'm not moaning. I think the only person I can hear moaning is you at the moment. And there's been a lot of it, let's face it.
Hold on, let me just get a few old episodes and play them back to you. Look, I can see both sides of this. You're going to say that's heresy, and you're going to say...
Heresy.
Yeah. So why? Why is that heresy?
Well, firstly, if you were driving something with an MX-5 engine, you're not driving a Sunbeam Alpine. You're driving some kind of bastardized son or daughter of an MX-5. So that's wrong, in my opinion. Secondly, if you're going to do the engine upgrades you're talking about, particularly with the Ford V6 Cologne, then you're going to have to upgrade the brakes because you'll need to stop quicker. You're going to have to upgrade the suspension because you have to ride better because you'll be doing faster speeds. You'll have to upgrade the steering. And what are you left with? I mean, you're left with a kind of pastiche, a kind of kit car dressed up in a Sunbeam Alpine body. You know, I get that it's a 60s engine and it's not probably that reliable or even that much fun
powerful.
Because I do think it came from the Hillman Husky van, didn't it? I just like to drop that in every episode.
Maybe.
But you've got the 1725. So have you ever thought about actually doing some upgrade work to it? You know, putting some new carbs on it, some Weber carbs, a better camshaft, for example, or better steering. I mean, you can do all of those upgrades and still keep it relatively original. What about that instead of ripping out the engine and putting an MX-5 in it?
Well, I've sort of been there, seen it, done it, because I have replaced the twin Stroppy Stromberg carbs with always out of tune with a Weber carb, a single Weber carb, which is designed for that car with a better manifold on it. So I've done that. It's also got electronic ignition, so actually it runs okay. But I don't know. I've got a thing, and this is where we've talked about this before. You and I have a different approach. I have a vision of my shiny, perfect classic car in my garage that is pretty low maintenance, and an old lump isn't pretty low maintenance because there's always something dripping from it. You know, there's always...
Hang on, are we talking about the car again?
I think so. It might be a simile. You never know.
You know, I had that 1966 Porsche 912, and for the 3 years I had it, I could never get the engine running right. And I'd go between specialist and specialist, and they'd all slag off the previous specialist work, say you need to do this. And I don't think I had a single journey in that car when the engine was fully running on song. It would always have something wrong with it. So I get that part of it. But instead, I just sold the car and bought something else which is more reliable, because I've got a 1986 Mercedes 300 SL. Starts on the button, doesn't leak, goes, stops, does all the kind of stuff. So I think you've probably got the wrong car. Why don't you think about buying a new car? Particularly if you're going to do engine swaps and brake swaps and suspension swaps, you'd be 20 or 30 grand into it. So why don't you just buy a better car? Well,
that's the thing as well. I think I would only probably do it. It's not economical. There's no business case for it doing it in the car that I've got. If I was going to land on a sort of forever car, or one that I would keep for a long time, and I would strip it back and start from scratch, then maybe I would think about putting that in. But then even then I'm sort of stopping myself as I'm saying that and thinking, well, actually the beauty of it is a bit of originality. But why have we've got a real hang up about that in the UK, haven't we? We've got a real hang up about things being original. And, you know, the first thing
that matters, because it not being original means it's fake. And, you know, fake handbags and fake watches.
Fake.
It is fake because it's not a real thing, is it?
It's not fake, is it? Because the car is genuine. All you've done is improve.
It's not a Sunbeam Alpine then, is it? It's a Sunbeam Alpine that you have to say, but with an MX-5 engine. So it's like, yeah, it's a Rolex, but it was made in a sweatshop somewhere in China. So it's not really a Sunbeam Alpine, is it?
Well, I suppose it's a Rolex with a different movement in it, isn't it? Which you could argue
which isn't a Rolex, then,
which is not original. Now, I think for now I will leave my oily lump. And
Don't talk about me like that.
Yeah, it's less expensive than trying to divorce it.
I do think, though, yeah, exactly. I do think that if you're going to do a Sunbeam Alpine upgrade, it's got to be the V8 to turn it into a kind of mock Tiger. Would you consider that?
Yeah, I would. But okay, you know, as we've spoken about in the past, you know, it's cheaper to just buy the original thing now, with labour costs of actually having it done. But it's funny, even if you put a brand new engine in, as you said, the minute you pulled that engine into a mechanic, they would say, who did this? Who worked on this last time? What have they done? No, they've wired that up wrong. They've done this. No, it's always the same, isn't it? So, yeah, I think we just have to put up with it, don't we? It's just part of owning a classic car.
So to summarise, you had an idea, it was quite wrong, and now you've gone back to the beginning.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like being married. Okay, you're listening to episode 27 of The Tyre Kickers, and time for our hopefully soon-to-be award-winning Crush or Caress feature to make a return. And today, I've oiled the spigots of the Crusher because I want it to be working at 100% efficiency to kill off this bête noire of mine, a gem of British dull and boring design. It's the ugly, the frumpy, suburban saloon, the Rover P6.
Now, in this caring, sharing, cuddly, touchy-feely age, I'm not going to say that you're completely and utterly wrong on this one, just you're not right. The P6 was the Rover between the P4, the stately P5 was sold alongside the P6 until 1973, and the SD1. So the P6 was the smaller Rover saloon produced between 1963 and 1977.
And throughout the whole of its run, it was frumpy and fugly. Every time I'm near one, Max, I recoil. Both the interior and exterior, I just find them yuck. I just don't get it as a car or as a concept. And I imagine it probably looked dated when it was released. It's an old man's car, and it's not dated well.
Now, I'm going to absolutely go off on one here because you are completely and totally wrong on this. Because when you remember when the P6 was designed, there weren't that many drivers' cars around, and it was the dawn of the motorway age. It was a really exciting time, and the P6 was a really genuinely exciting car. It was a sophisticated car, great front and rear suspension, four-wheel discs, full synchro gearbox. And it was something that people aspired to because you could drive it on the new motorways and you could be involved with the drive and have a great drive. And you could drive it to work in the week, and at the weekend you could take your family away. I mean, admittedly in the 60s, you could either go to a safari park or the beach, and that was all you'd do. But it was about the drive was part of the experience. You went out to drive things. It was when you used the word motor as a verb. I motored somewhere, you motored somewhere, we motored somewhere, because motoring was the experience. And the Rover P6 was designed to be part of that experience. And there's no bad P6. You know, the 2000, the 2200 later, the SCs, the TCs, the 3500 V8, the 3500 S, they were all really, really good cars. They drove great. And what I really got to defend the P6 about this is that nowadays, if you want a motorway car, it's got autonomous driving and it's got screens and everything is there to deflect away from the experience of driving. But the P6 was about the experience of driving. It was a driver's car. You could take it on the motorways. It would stop quick enough. It would go quick enough. It was a really forward-thinking piece of design that Rover came up with. And you want to put it in the Crusher.
Just look at it. It's about as exciting as a flannel dressing gown. You know, it's just dull. It's everything that I don't like about British cars. You know, it's just boring. I know the design may have. I think the design probably looked old in the 60s. It's got those horrible eyebrow side lights. Just from every
safety
angle.
Side lights, so you could see they were on from the driver's side.
From every angle, it's just dull. And whenever I've been near one of these cars in the flesh, I just can't. My heart sinks. The interior is horrible. The exterior, the design is horrible. It's just like a slabby lump.
I think if you look at the P6, it was a huge step forward from the P4, and there was the P5 sold alongside it. So they were two very different cars. This is the mid-size Rover. You know, classic, it was a kind of bank manager's, store manager's car. But it was a great car for Britain because it was going into a really exciting time. It was a great piece of design. And overall, it just drove really nicely. And that's the key, isn't it? Lots of cars, when the Rover P6 was designed, drove badly. But the P6 was such a great car, you could speed on one in the motorway and you'd be nicked by one with a P6 that was used by the police. It was so good. It was both the cops and robbers car. So I don't see how you can say that about the P6. I mean, I absolutely love a P6. I've driven quite a few. I think they're absolutely fantastic.
It's an ugly car. It's an ugly, slabby car. You say about the design, they didn't think about where to put the spare wheel, did they? Because they shoved that in the boot. There was no room.
Okay, yeah.
So you had to get a kit to stick it on the boot. which actually does look quite cool. But
The
then you
touring
can't see
kit, yeah.
Then you can't see out the back window. So
You'll be going too fast. You won't need to worry about what's behind you. I think the key to one of these is having a good drive in them. Because if you drive them 10 tenths, if you go flat out in a P6, it starts to show you, particularly if it's sorted, it starts to show you what a great driver's car it is. You're kind of cornering on the door handles. It brakes, it goes, it handles really nicely. Okay, it looks a bit wobbly because it is, but that's half the fun. It's got some movement in it. You can actually feel this car is alive through the tiny, thin steering wheel. And all of those engines are good engines. But personally, obviously, I'd have the V8S. And if you get one of those going, they're quick cars even today. That thing can shift. It shifts, it handles up to a point. And okay, it may not suit your sensibilities in terms of how it looks, but it is a genuinely fantastic driver's car design. And for that, it can't be crushed.
Nah. When this came out, what, 63, 64, something like that. Its main competitor was the Triumph 2000. I probably lobbed that in the crusher as well. And it's competition.
How long is this episode going to go on for?
Listen to the competition. You could have had, instead of that, a Citroen DS or a Mercedes 114,
Citroens
115.
were really slow. I mean, that
doesn't matter. They look beautiful.
Yeah, but it wasn't a great motorway car, was it? It was really.
You're saying, compared to other cars in the 60s, this looked good. Compared to a DS, it doesn't.
Yeah, but this was the British DS.
It looks like a Minger compared to
It was designed for motorways, in which the DS wasn't. You know, the DS was not a particularly good motorway car. Reasonably quick, but it wasn't a great engine in the DS. You've got to admit that.
That would look better going up the M1 than this heap of junk. And Mercedes 114, 115, hands down.
Yeah, but a completely different price point, that. I mean, the Mercedes was like 2 or 3 times the price of the Rover P6. You know, they were quite expensive at the time, but not too expensive to be on the average family's drive. And that's what's so good about the P6. It was an average family car that really rewarded the driver.
Do you think it was an average family car? I think it's probably too expensive to be an average family car, wasn't it?
Okay,
I mean, realistically, yeah.
Slightly above average. It doesn't sound quite as good,
car. Yeah. It's a bank manager's car, wasn't it? And I think that's the kind of problem with it for me. It's just frumpy, conservative kind of 60s car that has some, you know, technical innovation, but it just didn't push the style thing forward enough. You know, compare that to a 60s Alpha or a Citroen DS or something. I just think the design is boring and frumpy, and I just want to crush it.
Unfortunately, under the rules of Crush or Caress, rule number 29A, you can't do that unless we both agree. It can't go in the crusher unless it's unanimous, and I'm not letting you.
I'm just looking at some pictures of Lancia. Well, there is quite a nice...
Right.
There's a quite nice blue one I've seen.
What model is it?
It's a 3500. So, yeah, which has got the V8.
That's the engine to have.
Yeah, to be honest, this one has actually been refurbed and been done nicely, and actually the colour is really nice on it, and the wheels look good and all that sort of stuff.
So actually you do like them now?
Well, no, I don't. I like that one, but
right.
I wouldn't...
Well, it is a Rover P6. So.
I wouldn't put it in my garage.
Ergo, you like them?
No. We'll throw it open to you then. What do you think? We'll put it on our Instagram. Crush or caress the P6. It sounds like it's got a reprieve for now. But what do you think? Is Max right or am I right?
The Tyre Kickers. Classic car chat with Max and Matt.
You're listening to the Tyre Kickers episode 27. Good to have you along. Now, just a heads up that very soon we're going to be releasing a special bonus episode on L322 Range Rovers. In descending order of importance, those are the ones loved by Jeremy Clarkson, Harry Metcalf from Harry's Garage, and of course the late Queen.
So we're talking here 2001 to 2012 Range Rovers, the ones planned under BMW and then made by Ford. Now, Max, these are the ones with a laundry list of common problems and hard to diagnose faults, yes?
Well, it depends on your point of view. I would start to say now that these Range Rovers are so cool that you stop thinking about them as a modern car and start thinking about them as a classic car.
You're saying that we should think of them as an unreliable classic car.
Just a classic car, because most classic cars are unreliable, aren't they? So I think if you stop thinking of them as a modern car and start thinking of them as a classic, then you've got a really good classic Range Rover, because they're better than the Range Rover Classics because they don't rust quite as badly and they do drive better, but they have all those classic Range Rover styling cues.
Okay. All right. Well, they do look good, so go on, make the case for them then.
Once you've got over that change of mindset that the L322 is now a classic car, you've got to look at what it gives you, because it does give you a really good drive. It gives you some really good engines, both petrol and diesel engines, particularly the later V8s are really good. I just think they look really classic. If you get them in that classic late Queen spec, if you like, which has got the small wheels and no privacy glass, I think they're super cool cars. They've stood the test of time. The original design was really, really good. And you get a really comfortable modern driving car with all the classic looks that, unlike the Range Rover Classic, doesn't rot from inside, and you get a decent drive.
So you've been going on about these for a while. L322s, we should do stuff. So you've been and done a bonus episode, haven't you, on this? What have you learnt on your reporting travels?
Was that a genuine impersonation of me?
No, you're a bit more moany. I'm saying that.
I have been banging on about these for a while, and not alone, to be honest. You know, Jeremy Clarkson drives one on his farm program. Harry Metcalf drives one in his farm. I've been talking to James Garlick from Full Fat 4x4. He's an expert in L322. So I asked him roughly what he thought of the L322.
They are fantastic vehicles to drive. They're great to own. They're actually quite easy to work on. It does take a bit of kind of getting into them, but once you kind of know where everything is, they are relatively straightforward to work on. They're very easy to live with. They're reasonably economic to run, and also the great thing is that you can get parts for them. You know, there's still loads of different aftermarket part suppliers, and you can still buy new OEM kit.
What is so good about the L322 then? Why do so many people love them as opposed to the Range Rovers before and after?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's that kind of combination of being very easy to live with. They are, I think, more reliable than people like to let on. And they are fabulously comfortable. So you have a really, really nice driving position. You get a captain's armrest on the left. You get really good visibility out over the road. And also the driving style is both sort of very relaxed, but, you know, they all have reasonably big engines in them. So when you punch your foot down, it can be quite a spirited and entertaining drive as well.
So there's an L322 Range Rover Classic episode of the Tyre Kickers coming very soon. And I was really taken with them, Matt. I've already liked them. I've driven a few of them, particularly when they were new, actually. I drove a few of them and liked them then. But I think now they're classic cars. And once you start thinking with a classic car mindset, the boggling problems and the sheer amount of things that go wrong aren't quite as daunting.
Quite a good business idea, though, isn't it, fixing L322s? Because a quick Google says that they have problems with air suspension, electrical issues, hub bushes, brake wear, alternators, transfer box motors, position sensors, and then steering column motors as well as the gearbox that you mentioned. Actually, YouTuber It's Joel has picked up one of these. I don't know if you follow him. He got one for $2,000, and it's not exactly been trouble-free. I've got a clip of him here, and he's trying to find out what's wrong with his gearbox.
If I just give it a little bit of throttle, there you go. There's some humming going on. Now, it's a bit unnerving, and alongside that, the car feels slightly slow to respond, slightly underpowered potentially, and also there's a fair bit of what I think is clutch slipping going on.
Oh, sounds like it's going well then. Is that
Yeah,
is that part of the owning experience?
It's still going, isn't it? First of all, he's recording that while driving, so that's a plus.
To get it
it's not
fixed.
broken down. Yeah, to get it fixed. But there's plenty of expertise now around about these L322s. They're not as scary as the later ones.
There's obviously a love for them because you do see quite a few of them around. And as you say, you know, there's some quite high profile users still of them. I think it must be a sweet spot in that range of Range Rovers. It looks good, doesn't it? And as long as you don't mind, you know, the usual sort of maintenance that comes with a big luxury car of that type, it's probably worth it. There must be a reason, Max, that these are so popular.
I think you need to think about them alongside other classics. So I think it would be a really good rival to one of our favourite cars, a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, because you want to ponce around in them, basically. You want to feel like you're royalty. You want that kind of high-class driving experience and interior experience. I think the L322s are going to be a future classic. I do think that the examples of the last models, which was the run-out Westminster, particularly low mileage models, they're starting to go up in value and people are starting to squirrel them away.
Yes, it sounds like it's a car that is definitely worth a look. And probably like a Silver Shadow, is definitely worth a well-researched buy, isn't it? So this is why you've gone and done a bonus episode, which we're going to put squeeze in between this episode and the next episode. So that'll drop shortly. And it's a good listen. It is worth doing some research on these, I take it.
Yeah, because there's loads and loads of different engine and gearbox combinations. There's loads of different interior combinations, from the Vogue to the HSE to the autobiographies to the Westminsters. I mean, there's a lot out there. They were running for about 10, 11 years. So there's lots of different ones out there. And you've just got to pick what you fancy. Do you want a supercharged petrol? Do you want a V8 diesel, which are really nice and really powerful? Do you want a base earlier one with a BMW 3-litre diesel? Or do you want something which is just a bit more Jaguar? I mean, so many manufacturers owned Land Rover during this period that they've got bits of everything in from Ford and Jaguar and BMW. So you just need to do your research. But at the end of it, you can end up with a really high quality, classy car.
Okay, well, bonus episode coming your way very shortly. Listen out for that.
Okay, let's also look at some reaction from you guys. You've been all over our socials recently, so let's round up the chat. If you listened to the last episode, you'll have heard us talking about whether dressing up in stuff like driving gloves and overalls to drive your classic was a good idea or not.
Yes, well, Kevin Bryant on Instagram got straight to the point. He said, gloves, yes. Flying jacket, no. Some form of hat, though, is a must to avoid a cold head. White overalls, though, he said, never.
I'm guessing you didn't buy those overalls, did you? Please say no.
Well, I've got them on sale or return for you for your birthday. It's coming up.
Lee Hussein on Facebook is also hesitant, saying getting dressed in period stuff these days would probably get a funny look. Right. He says, I'll be too self-conscious to drive down the road looking like Toad of Toad Hall.
Clearly never seen you in your SL. Jago Brett on Instagram, though, says having the right footwear can actually help. He says driving shoes are great to enhance your driving experience in comparison to, say, with a big clumpy pair of old boots or chunky trainers. I'd agree with that. They also let you properly heel and toe, if that's your thing.
Gary Summers on Facebook gets involved in the debate too, saying, whilst I appreciate the effort of keeping in period, going around looking like an RAF museum piece is a step too far, chocks away and all that. And he adds, listen to this, loving the podcast, keep up the brilliant entertainment.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind, Gary. Thank you very much. Chicks and his Triumph Stag on Facebook says, you do actually need some clobber because of the great UK weather. He says owning a convertible definitely means you need some kind of hardy jacket, possibly some gloves as well, especially with the British weather. I've gone leather, he says, rather than a flying jacket, and it does the job nicely.
So cheers for all of those great comments and good to get your views on that. Also in the last episode, we talked about the Batmobile versus Bond's DB5 as the best film or TV car. Now, I argued custom car builder George Barris's Batmobile was by far the best. Matt, obviously, argued that Bond's DB5 was better.
Yeah, and annoyingly, Mark Palmer on Facebook agrees with you. He says for design, it's got to be George Barris and the Batmobile. He had a TV show budget and an old car. We all know, on the other hand, that Q designed the DB5 and he had the funding of MI6.
I'm going to resist the temptation to say I told you so, but I told you so. Now, Darren Pendleton also got in touch to say he got the chance to actually drive a Batmobile on an experience day. He says it felt very boat-like and didn't want to turn. Overall, he said it was very disappointing with lazy power. He says maybe if I had the outfit and grappling hook, it would have been better.
And finally, Keith D'Souza also shot us a note to say that he genuinely loved the info given about the Batmobile. More of the same, he says. Well, along with Max, that's two nerds.
Here's how to contact us. On Instagram, we are The Tyre Kickers UK, all one word. On Facebook, find us at The Tyre Kickers. That's 3 separate words.
The Tyre Kickers. With Max and Matt.
So that's about all for this episode. Get in touch with us on the various methods if you want to save the Rover P6 or just talk engine swaps.
In the next episode of Us, we talk about rat rods. Would you drive something that's deliberately tatty just to look cool?
Or just look like a tool? Coming up is Max's L322 Range Rover special, which is out in between this episode and the next one. Until then, see you next time on the main Tyre Kickers. Bye.
Goodbye.
Do you want to do that again?
Yes.
It's like a word salad.
The last drink I had was 1 o'clock this morning and it was a whiskey sour. And it was, at the time, it was lovely. But now I'm starting to regret it. Yeah.